There is supposedly a merit to every life, but some lives are just born cursed, where anything they touch gets destroyed. Sometimes it could be in a figurative sense, but for these two, it's an absolute reality. These two cursed beings are... Mahito versus Shigaraki. Now, this prediction is going to be formatted differently than the rest of the ones I've done. With Kratos versus Asura, I felt I was in depth on their equipment, but I didn't go into their scaling or explain why I scaled them the way I did. For Ghost Rider vs. Spawn, I tried to just get out the crux of the argument, but I am honestly really disappointed in how that video turned out. For this one, I'm going to be breaking down characters into categories, kind of like what Death Battle does for their conclusions. Let me know what you think about this format after you've finished the video. I want to see if people like this method more, because honestly after scripting it, I think I do too. But before we get into each of those categories, I just want to talk about their connections. These are two very philosophical villains who speak of what it means to be a curse as well as what it means to be a hero. But they are both very childish in nature. Shigaraki can be easily agitated and Mahito can be very condescending. Both can destroy essentially any person with just a touch, and both have a lot of symbolism with a bunch of hands. These two characters meeting or having a crossover would be something of a dream for me. I want this episode to come out so badly. I don't know if there's a single person in this community that loves this matchup as much as I do, but let's talk about the fun stuff. Let's get to that debate. Starting with my first category, equipment and abilities. I'm going to go over their similar abilities first, before breaking off into talking about their more diverse abilities. Both Mahito and Shigaraki can alter their body. Mahito can change the shape of his soul, transforming parts of his body to really anything he wants. Like he could turn his legs animalistic to make him faster, and he could turn his arms into wings for flight. Shigaraki also can fly with a quirk called Wings. It literally sprouts wings in his back and lets him fly. So it's very possible that we could get a sky battle here, which is awesome. If Mahito didn't just turn parts of his body animalistic, he could just straight up turn into animals. Transform his body parts into blades or guns. These guns can shoot out souls that Mahito can alter while in midair. There's gonna be more on that soon. Shigaraki, on the other hand, can't alter his body the same way Mahito can. His form kept getting altered because his body was trying to adapt to the crazy amount of quirks that were being stored inside of him. Their body alterations just aren't the same. Mahito's are reactive and Shigaraki's are adaptive. The main connection here is obviously they can both destroy people with a touch. Shigaraki has his decay ability that lets him disintegrate anything he touches, and Mahito has his idle transfiguration, which lets him alter the shape of a person's soul, making their bodies morph into monsters or just pop them like a balloon. Both idle transfiguration and decay can go through durability, which is funny because they both have defensive forms. When Shigaraki's body was adapting, he was fighting a bunch of heroes including Eraserhead, who can erase the quirks of any person he's currently staring at. While Shigaraki's quirks were erased, his body had adapted to be super defensive, just so his body was able to last while the heroes were beating him down. Mahito has a more impressive transformation. He got pushed to the limit when fighting Itadori, and his body adapted to become more defensive as well. But this ability also increases his strength by 200%. This is called Idle Transfiguration Instant Spirit Body of Distorted Killing. This makes his body much harder. His blades are also much stronger and sharper. These blades started cutting Itadori easily, when previously his blades had been broken by making contact with Itadori's skull. He can even turn the air into wind razors that can cut people. That's really their only similarities. Let's get into their differences. As I said earlier, Mahito can transmute his own and other people's souls into whatever he wants. He can keep these souls on or inside his body as a human stockpile. These take the forms of little pills that Mahito can alter in midair after throwing. This essentially lets Mahito have a monster army at his side at all times. Not only can Mahito turn these guys into generic monsters, he could turn them into different things like big walls that push themselves against the opponent, giant hands to pin someone down, or even a giant train that will actually follow the train tracks in an attempt to crush you. Mahito learns an ability called Polymorphic Soul Isomer, which essentially lets him fuse souls together to make one stronger monster. These monsters are physically way stronger than his normal souls, but are still quite fragile. If his mini pocket army isn't enough, He's even able to clone himself. Although this clone isn't a complete copy. His copy can't alter the soul of the people it touches. He can only morph his own soul. It's still quite versatile, but just lacks Mahito's main ability. Although Mahito can still alter someone's soul with his original body while his clone attacks separately. So there is a chance of a pretty deadly double team. If that wasn't enough, he can also split his body into separate pieces, removing his head from his body and having his head flee while his body continued to fight. Mahito is very hard to hit. He always morphs his body right before impact to avoid attacks. This could be him stretching his torso or altering his size to avoid incoming attacks. When Mahito is in a pinch, he can perform something called a Black Flash. This attack increases his speed immensely and gives this one punch a 2.5 times power increase. Most of Mahito's deadly attacks require Mahito to be directly touching an opponent, which would be hard to do if someone is so much faster than him. But Mahito has two abilities that can either kill Shigaraki or at least create an opening for Mahito to deliver a kill. Mahito can use something called Soul Multiplicity, which combines a lot of the souls that he has stored to create one massive AoE attack that can harm or pin down enemies. And of course, he has his domain expansion, Self-Embodiment of Perfection. This is a spatial bubble where if you are trapped inside, your soul is always touching Mahito. So Mahito could just kill you in an instant and there's nothing you can do about it. The hands in this domain also appear to be physically more powerful than Mahito. Mahito fought the giant robot that Mechamaru was piloting. Mahito wasn't able to pierce or destroy the robot normally, only really knocking it around. But the giant hands in this domain were able to tear apart that giant robot easily. Now, I don't think his domain would outpower his defensive form, but it is still worth mentioning. Mahito's whole style of combat is overwhelm and be unpredictable, but Shigaraki has plenty of ways to keep his distance as well as take care of the souls that Mahito throws at him pretty easily. Shigaraki has All for One, which lets him steal quirks for himself or distribute them to others. This really wouldn't do anything in this fight, but it is the reason he has so many different quirks. Shigaraki can blast an opponent away with his air cannon quirk, which sends a giant blast of air from his hands. He can disrupt electronic appliances and transmit communications with his quirk Radio Waves, which wouldn't do much on its own, but he could call the Nomu to battle if the Death Battle crew wanted to be amazing. He has a quirk called Spring-like Limbs, which lets him coil up his muscles to do things like jump extremely high and launch enemies backwards. Shigaraki can also combine this quirk with his air cannon for added force. For even more added power, he has the quirk Heavy Payload, which can increase the power of any of the user's attacks. He once combined Heavy Payload, Air Cannon, and Radio Waves all at once to create a gigantic air/electrical attack. So Shigaraki is very versatile in how he uses his abilities. Because of this, I was curious if he could combine his quirk Rivet Stab, which turns Shigaraki's fingers into long black tendrils that will pierce enemies, with his Decay ability. Not only did I not find any proof of Shigaraki ever doing that, it seems like he needs all 5 fingers and his palm to be on an opponent for Decay to activate, as evidenced in the scene where Shigaraki is threatening Deku in public. Shigaraki already had his hand on Deku's neck, and he kept saying that all he would need to do is put his last finger on Deku's neck to kill him. So that pretty much deconfirmed what I was thinking. If Shigaraki is overwhelmed with Mahito's souls, he can use his search quirk to monitor up to 100 people and learn their exact locations and weak points. Once they have been identified, he can track them from miles. So even if Mahito split off and ran away, Shigaraki would always be able to track where he goes. Even if he didn't use Search, Shigaraki stole Danger Sense from Deku, which is a passive quirk that lets Shigaraki sense danger and give him time to avoid any attack. Finally, Shigaraki has the Reflect quirk, which lets him redirect any attack back at his opponent with the same strength that it hit him with. I initially thought that this would be useless in this debate, but I actually think this ability would work on the Black Flash. Imagine Shigaraki tanks a Black Flash just to redirect it back at Mahito, causing Mahito to actually feel damage for the first time in this fight. That would be so cool. Shigaraki did lose this quirk when he absorbed the quirk New World Order, which is a very complicated quirk to understand. Mahito couldn't use this quirk though, and New World Order essentially destroyed itself and Reflect in the process. I personally think it's still fair to give Shigaraki Reflect though. We are taking these characters at their strongest points and not at some random point within the story. I think Shigaraki takes this category overall though. He has way more versatile abilities, definitely has both the close and long-ranged advantages, and has plenty of ways to defeat Mahito's army and prevent himself from getting overwhelmed. I mean, with Decay alone, this guy was able to pretty much level an entire town. Shigaraki's abilities are just a little too busted, but abilities isn't all that matters in a fight. Power, speed, experience, and resistances also play a major factor. So let's go over those, shall we? Starting with power. Shigaraki's AP should be similar to Deku and All Might at his prime. Deku was able to clear the entire sky of clouds, which would put Shigaraki anywhere from continental to multi-continental in strength. Mahito in his strongest state was able to create this crater by slamming Yuji into the ground, With that and the fact that he can casually throw people through buildings and compare to curses like Jogo, who was able to pull down a giant meteor and destroy a big part of the city, I'd scale Mahito anywhere from city block to small town levels of power. Significantly weaker than Shigaraki, who can match that level of power just by putting his palm on the ground and watching a city disintegrate along with everything in it. So this is the second category Shigaraki wins. For speed, Mahito scales to Yuji, whose best speed feat is being able to dodge bullets. This would put Mahito at subsonic plus speeds. Shigaraki being able to control and shoot out radio waves would automatically put him at light speed. Now it is true that when performing Black Flash, there is a great speed increase. Using this attack, Mahito can move at sub-relativistic speeds. But as you can tell, Shigaraki is still far faster, meaning that he's also taking this category. For experience, I think Shigaraki absolutely wins this category. Not only has he been around and has been fighting much longer than Mahito, but he's been contending with people who have vastly different powers, while the people Mahito have fought have been far more limited. I think Mahito does adapt in combat faster than Shigaraki, but I don't think Mahito can do anything that Shigaraki hasn't seen before. With Shigaraki being also much faster and much stronger, Mahito's adaptability will only do so much to close that gap. And finally, resistances. Shigaraki can resist a lot of things: mind manipulation, possession, heat, etc. He can also essentially heal from any wound as long as his head is intact because of his super regeneration quirk. But Mahito actually takes this category. There's only two ways to kill Mahito: disrupt the shape of his soul by directly damaging it, or disintegrate his body into nothing. Mahito can come back from any wound that doesn't completely destroy his body. When Nanami dropped a shit ton of large boulders on top of Mahito, he was able to completely return to normal. In this scene, Mahito implies that if his whole body was destroyed, he wouldn't have been able to come back. Shigaraki would not be able to harm Mahito's soul, but he could disintegrate Mahito with decay, while Mahito could still kill Shigaraki by opening his domain or simply touching Shigaraki's face. This means that only one technique that Shigaraki has could kill Mahito, while multiple of Mahito's abilities would kill Shigaraki. Just to get this out of the way, I don't see cursed spirits as comparable to vestiges. Vestiges are beings that are heavily tied to All for One and One for All. The past inheritors of these quirks exist within the current user of the quirk, but they don't appear anywhere else in My Hero Academia. In fact, I'm pretty sure every single vestige is gone by the end of the series when those quirks cease to exist. On top of that, Shigaraki never inherently harms or kills vestiges. The most they could do is try to influence or take control of the current user. They never get harmed or disintegrated by Shigaraki, so I really doubt he would be able to do the same thing to the souls of the cursed spirits. Also, just because I'm not sure where to fit this into this video, I think Shigaraki should be able to see Mahito. Normal people have seen cursed spirits before, and honestly, I think it would be lame to have a death battle where one combatant can't even see the other. Before I get into who I think wins, what do I want to see from this fight? I need to see both of their ultra defense forms fight each other, both of their bodies adapted into a form where they focus on guarding and defense. I want to see Mahito open his domain, but I don't want it to be the winning blow. I think that his defense form that I brought up previously should be his final form in the fight. Shigaraki should either blow Mahito out of his domain by combining air cannon, radio wave, and heavy payload, or using decay on the side of the domain to destroy the dome containing them, which would let Shigaraki break out of this domain. And lastly, I know we probably won't get it, but I want to fight between a few Nomu and the polymorphic soul isomer units. The Nomu without a doubt stomp Mahito's creations, but it's cool that we can turn this into a slight army battle. There's so many fun ways their abilities can bounce off each other, and the banter could be so much fun. Mahito is really going to piss off Shigaraki, and I can't wait to see that. But who do I think wins? I think Shigaraki wins. Before I found out that Mahito could die if his physical body is completely destroyed, I thought despite all of his disadvantages, he could still win this. I very much believe that that boulder feat should be taken literally, that even though Shigaraki can't harm Mahito's soul, he should be able to disintegrate his whole body to a point where it can't come back. With Shigaraki's speed advantage, decay would definitely be enough to kill Mahito. Even if Mahito opened up his domain, I'm pretty sure Shigaraki would be able to sense the danger coming his way and disintegrate Mahito before the domain actually takes effect. It kinda sucks that Mahito doesn't have that many advantages, but I still think this episode is going to be amazing. As always, it's possible that I've missed something or misinterpreted certain abilities or feats, so feel free to debate or have a conversation with me in the comments below. Until next time though, take care everyone, and have a great day.